Welcome, everyone. I'm Tom.
And I'm Amy.
Great to have you with us.
Hello. Yeah, we're here to help you sort of cut through the noise, get straight to the core insights from some really fascinating uh, source material we've been looking at.
Yeah,
And today we're exploring something pretty urgent, actually. It really highlights these huge shifts happening globally right now.
absolutely. We've spent time with some compelling discussions featuring Jacek Bartosiak, who's head of strategy and future, and Piotr Zekovich from the Historia Realna YouTube channel. And they're really laying out a vision that, well, it could define the next few years, geopolitically speaking.
Definitely. Our aim here is to clarify how Poland and Europe more broadly are navigating these complex geopolitical challenges. We're focusing particularly on the growing prospect of a multi-front conflict and the strategic changes that forces.
Right.
You'll get a clearer picture, hopefully, of the stakes, the key players involved, and really what it all might mean for the future of international relations. So let's get into it.
Okay, let's start with a really stark warning. It kind of sets the stage.
Hmm.
We heard from General Alexis Grinkovich. He heads up U.S. forces and NATO in Europe.
Right.
And he stated pretty clearly that NATO has to prepare for a simultaneous war.
Right.
He's talking China in the Pacific, Russia in Europe. Potentially, and this is the kicker, by 2027. That's really not far off.
Yeah, I mean, 2027 is practically around the corner. And what's striking is Jacek Bartosiak's reaction to this. Apparently, he wasn't surprised. Not at all.
Hmm.
He sees this as a scenario that basically everyone, Poland, NATO, the U.S., they should have been actively planning for this already. Which leads to a pretty critical question, doesn't it?
Which is?
Well, if it's so obvious to experts like him, why isn't the response, the collective response, more coordinated,
Yeah.
more proactive, especially with that kind of timeline looming?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it gets even more, I guess, intriguing when Bartosiak suggests Europe might still have a window, a chance to maybe dodge this war by striking some kind of deal with China.
Yeah.
But then you flip the coin, and you've got these major figures in the U.S. military establishment, like Elbridge Colby. He was a top Pentagon official dealing with allies.
Right, I remember him.
He's already pushing allies like Australia and Japan for their specific war plans against China. But here's the thing. Without sharing America's own plans in return, it seems like a very, well, strategically unbalanced situation.
It really does highlight a tension, doesn't it, when you put it in the bigger picture? Think about President Trump, he's putting tariffs on Europe.
Right.
But then at the same time, he's talking up shared security, telling European nations, buy patriots, support Ukraine.
It's a contradictory.
Exactly. And Bartosiak argues this kind of paradox. It absolutely demands what he calls great European leadership, someone to navigate these mixed signals and figure out Europe's own path.
Okay, so let's bring it closer to the ground then. Poland,
It's here.
it's right there, frontline state, borders Russia, Ukraine, Belarus. It's undeniably exposed.
Hugely exposed.
Yeah, Bartosiak sounds quite concerned, maybe even laments what he sees as a lack of a clear, grand strategy from the Polish elites to actually deal with this changing landscape.
And this gets to a really crucial point he makes. Why? Why is there this strategic gap? He brings up something he calls, quite provocatively, the sin of Polish intelligence.
Okay, what does he mean by that?
Well, he argues that for centuries, Polish elites really clung to this ideological idea of Poland as a bulwark of Christianity, inherently part of the West,
Right.
even when the West didn't necessarily see them that way, especially during the partitions. Now, he admits this was crucial for survival back then, for cultural unity against, say, Russification.
Sure, makes sense.
But now, he says, it's become a trap. It actually stops them from focusing pragmatically on the hard material realities, things like infrastructure, tax systems, economic flows. The stuff that builds real state power today. They're stuck balancing ideology instead of focusing on practical action.
That's a fascinating idea, a trap.
Yeah.
And he used an example, right? Franco's Spain.
Exactly. It's a really vivid one. Spain was, ultra-conservative, even flirted with the Axis powers, had plans to grab Gibraltar.
Right.
But after World War II, boom, suddenly a key U.S. ally. Why? Not ideology, purely geopolitical utility. It controlled the Rimland, that strategic coastal area.
Correct, the geography.
Yeah, critical access to Mediterranean, plus it was staunchly anti-Soviet. So his point is, geopolitics often just, tramples right over ideology. Practical interests win out.
Okay, so connecting that back to Poland,
Yeah.
what does Bartosiak see as the consequences of this ideological rigidity?
Well, he suggests it leads to a whole series of critical mistakes. He points to a real disconnect with the current U.S. administration, a failure to really adapt Germany's rearmament. Germany's building up its military again, right?
Yeah.
And a basic misunderstanding, he thinks, of France's ongoing push for more European autonomy. And maybe most critically, he flags Poland turning away from Ukraine, specifically regarding modern military tech and understanding the transformation happening on the battlefield there. He sees that as a huge missed opportunity.
And he's also critical of Poland's own military modernization efforts, isn't he?
Oh, very critical. He suggests they're mostly aimed at, well, impressing the Americans, fitting into NATO structures, rather than building truly independent, robust defense capabilities.
Right.
He mentions General Gromadzinski's view that the U.S. is going to focus on China, and Europe is now responsible for handling Russia. That's the new reality.
And it's interesting what you said about general speaking sense only after leaving.
Yeah, Bartosiak notes that pattern. It's quite telling, isn't it? It hints at maybe a stifling environment within the official structures.
Definitely.
And it underlines his deeper point that Polish military thinking, in his view, is kind of stuck in a World War II mindset, focusing on maneuver, concentration of forces.
A traditional warfare.
Exactly. While ignoring what he calls the real revolution in military affairs, the RMA, that's completely changing how wars are actually fought today.
Okay, so let's break that down for you, the listener. This RMA, it isn't just about, say, bigger tanks or slightly more accurate missiles.
No, not at all.
It's a fundamental shift. It's about how fast information flows, about highly dispersed ways of striking the enemy, and crucially, this democratization of tools. Cheap, effective things like drones.
Precisely. And Bartosiak points straight to Ukraine as the living laboratory for this civilian military fusion. You see civilian tech, private money, bottom-up innovation being incredibly effective, sometimes more effective than the traditional military hierarchies.
Right.
And he worries Poland is operating like it's still 1939 with a 1939 army mindset, even while spending a massive 5% of its GDP on defense.
Wow, 5% is huge.
Yeah.
So why? Why isn't Poland adapting faster, according to him?
Well, he puts a lot of blame on the Polish political system itself, particularly this deep entrenched divide between the two main parties, PS and PO.
The political deadlock.
Yeah, and the older generation of leadership within them. He basically calls them defenders of the status quo. They genuinely believe, he thinks, that they delivered Poland's success over the last decades, and they're just unwilling to change course now.
Even though the world has changed.
Exactly. Even though, as he puts it, the whole epoch has changed, he's quite adamant there's no going back to the way things were, the status quo ante. That formula just doesn't work anymore.
He also brings up the Thucydides trap, doesn't he? That idea about rising powers challenging established ones, often leading to war.
He does. It's that classic historical pattern, rising power, China, versus established power, U.S. But interestingly, he offers a sliver of hope, or perhaps a different perspective.
Oh.
He suggests maybe peace is possible if China's military and industrial buildup is just so fast that it essentially blows past the trap phase quickly, making war essentially impossible or unwinnable for the U.S. because China becomes too strong too fast.
Like leapfrogging the danger zone.
Kind of. And he points to things like, the Houthis managing to challenge U.S. power projection in the Red Sea, or these incidents of Chinese aircraft apparently being undetectable by U.S. radar as examples of how quickly these power dynamics can shift.
That's unsettling. And he also mentions Steve Bannon's view.
Yeah, that's a much more provocative take. Bannon's claim that World War III has effectively already started.
Seriously.
Well, the argument is that if you add up the casualties from places like Ukraine, Gaza, and other ongoing conflicts, they already exceed the death toll from the first 2 years of World War II, like 1939 to 41.
Wow.
And Bartosiak credits Ukraine's fierce resistance, their resilience, for basically preventing a quick Russian win, which, he implies, would have escalated things very differently, possibly drawing Western Europe into a direct fight much sooner.
Okay, bringing it back to Poland's immediate neighborhood, Kaliningrad. That Russian exclave on the Baltic.
Right, sandwiched between Poland and Lithuania.
General Christopher Donahoe, the head of U.S. Army Europe, recently said the U.S. and allies could neutralize it very quickly if needed.
Yeah. And Bartosiak sees Kaliningrad as fundamentally a strategic trap for Russia, and therefore a potential point of leverage for Poland.
Leverage how?
Well, geographically it's vulnerable, but Bartosiak seems frustrated that Polish politicians appear almost afraid to even think about that strategically, to develop a plan B or leverage that position. They're stuck, he thinks, in this old collective alliance mindset, just assuming others will handle the hard security problems.
So a lack of independent strategic thinking.
That's what he's implying. It stops Poland from developing its own offensive capabilities or really playing its geopolitical cards effectively.
And looking at the bigger picture, the U.S.-Europe relationship, trade comes up too, right?
Absolutely. Bartosiak really emphasizes that Poland and Europe need to stop just making ideological statements about unity and start developing really pragmatic material responses, especially to America's shifting trade policy, which he sees as basically undermining the old foundations of the Western community, the whole liberal trade order.
So it's about economics again.
It often comes back to that. He has this almost cynical definition of Europe, not as ideals, but as a few Italian families, Bavarian businessmen, and French state industry. Meaning, these practical economic actors, driven by self-interest, might be the ones who actually figure out a path forward, rather than the politicians making speeches.
So the bottom line, Bartosiak's call to action for Poland is pretty radical.
It really is. He's
Yeah.
calling for a profound revolution in strategic thinking. We're talking active defense, not just passive waiting. Developing independent long-range strike capabilities,
Yeah.
fully embracing that civilian military fusion model we saw in Ukraine.
And reforming the reserves.
Completely reforming the reserve system, yeah, getting away from outdated structures. He points out that even spending that huge 5% of GDP comparable to Israel,
Wow.
it just isn't generating the strategic thought or the right kind of capabilities needed for this new era. He thinks the whole system is bureaucratic, siloed, not dynamic enough.
So it's a call for leadership.
It's a powerful call for Poland to step up, be a leader, not just a follower, to transform its approach to defense and strategy for this, well, this dramatically evolving world.
That was a really insightful look into some complex currents shaping our world and Poland's critical role in it all.
It certainly was.
Yeah.
And it's clear, isn't it? Adapting to these new realities, it's not just about throwing money at the problem. It demands a fundamental shift in perspective, in strategy, moving away from maybe comfortable old ideologies towards some hard, pragmatic realities. The big question that leaves you with is, will that shift happen? And will it happen in time?
Food for thought, definitely.
Thank you for your attention. You can subscribe our podcast if you like it.
See you next time.